again, the language and the symbols on the coinage become less and less significant markers of value. And the idea arises that maybe we don't need the state to mint money, either in imitation of the Roman Empire or eventually completely with their own symbols and ideas on them, until eventually in the late 7th century, we have in Visigothic Spain, it's the first time that anybody puts Jesus on a coin. And I feel like we're at the same, very similar moment in time. We can, with Bitcoin, create an entirely new society and build something radically different. Or we can use it to just replicate the system that we already have.
Michael Kelly, thank you for joining us.
I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to see where this discussion goes. Always lots to talk about with you.
100%. Let's get right into it. So tell us about the history of coinage and, more importantly, the history of energy that we've harnessed over the course of history.
It's a productive question to ask anybody in Bitcoin, but you're specifically now asking a historian. And a historian whose expertise is late antiquity, the Roman world, collapse of the Roman world. So I have a long story to tell you that is not just the typical things you hear from Vienna economics and so on. Austrian economics. But yeah, the history of coinage. Well, the thing that I'm really focused on, really interested in right now is, two things. One, I have a new volume coming out actually on the history of coinage in the early Middle Ages. And one of the interesting things we see after in the late Roman Empire and into the early Middle Ages in the Mediterranean, and particularly the Western Mediterranean, is a decentralization of coinage. And we see that the language and the symbols on coins, all minted by the state, have less and less significance as the empire collapses. Now, for many years, for many decades, probably since the 40s and 50s, people have been thinking about the analogy of the collapse of the Roman Empire and the collapse of the American Empire. And it's very easy to make very superficial comparisons. And so I'm not trying to do that here, even though it may sound like it. But we do see similar things, and that's the impact or the power structure inside of the empire as it declines and is unable to really control different parts of the society, and the traditional norms have disappeared. The language and the symbols on the coinage become less and less significant markers of value. And the idea arises that maybe we don't need the state to mint money. And this is what we start to see in the 6th, 7th century, where new kingdoms and new powers start to mint their own coins, either in imitation of the Roman Empire or eventually completely with their own symbols and ideas on them, until eventually in the late 7th century, we have in Visigothic Spain, it's the first time that anybody puts Jesus on a coin. So now you have a completely new representational symbolic figure. You went from the state being what gives authority to money to Jesus being what gives it. And that's a big shift. Just like for us, when we added, in God we trust to our currency, the state was still the authority there. And it would be interesting to see if at some point we remove the state and have only God in the coins. But within all of that, what was very interesting is that you had a broader, in Spain, decentralization of coinage. And that two things occurred. There were in Spain hundreds and hundreds of local mints in the towns. We're talking 6th, 7th century, early 8th century. and each one kind of produced its own coins, and that was really interesting. And one of the really interesting things is that the coins had fungible and non-fungible value. So they were made of gold, of bronze, less silver, and they also had, you could tell which mint they were from, so you could tell which artist really created them. And sometimes they would have value depending on who was actually creating them. And so there was a nominal um, relationship with the king in the center of the country, but there was also very much a decentralized order. And I wonder if that's where Bitcoin will end up going, right? With the government owning tons of Bitcoin at some point, and then just corporations like Strategy owning tons of Bitcoin. Will it kind of be the same situation where most of the Bitcoin is controlled from a few central sources and owned by a few central sources, and then but there's still a relative decentralization, and that it can circulate and even be created, of course, like it's happening in my Loki miner behind me right now. People can still create it at home, and so there's kind of this, yeah, hybrid version of centralization and decentralization, which feels to me like a lot of what Bitcoiners really want. Not what they all say, but ultimately what a lot of people really want, in the space. But within that, and why I also bring up that, is because I start to think about the history of cooling with coins. And I've never seen anybody write a book on this, and maybe I've just missed it, and maybe it's written in a language I don't know. So, but I'm in the heat punks movement in the U.S., right, which is hash rate heating. So using miners to heat your air, heat your water, and I started to think, where does that fit in the history of cooling technology and cooling with coins? Because when you're minting coins, there is a very important heating and then cooling process, and those processes are different depending on how you create the coins, when you create the coins, what climate you create the coins. And what we're doing now, again with the little miner behind me, and how we're recycling the heat and the energy inside of that. What is the history of that, like, and how do we fit in that history of that, and maybe what does the history of that tell us about what we can do more with heat recycling, which is the aim of the whole heat punk movement, to recycle energy, and demonstrate how green Bitcoin can be as an industry.
So it sounds like there are some deep parallels between, or deep connections between authority, money, religion, the state, and these kind of centralized figures. And you're alluding to kind of these connections between the Roman Empire as well as like now what we see today in the United States of America and the rest of the world. Um, how do you kind of see that parallel being built over the course of time?
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how the symbols of money change, because the U.S. dollar has value because it has the U.S. government's name on it, right?
Mhm.
Um, how long can that last? I mean, all empires come to an end, and all authority figures come to, ultimately lose their authority. So I don't know. I mean, it's different today. It's a very different world. The amount of technology that states, any state today, has for surveillance, control, monitoring is unbelievable to the Roman world, unbelievable to the 19th century. So Napoleon could only have dreamed of the power of centralization and surveillance and control that the United States, or any modern state, has today. So so maybe we're entering, maybe it's a, yeah, I don't want to be dystopian, but Bitcoin is I think we're at a very, very important moment in Bitcoin's history. There was a book in the 20th century called One Dimensional Man by Herbert Marcuse, which I always tell the students is the most important book of the 20th century, in that it talks about, written in the 1960s, it says that we had then all the technology to solve all the problems we've always wanted to solve: world hunger, to create peace, and so on. And it's what we decide to do with the technology that matters, not the creation of ever new technologies. So, will we decide to do that, or will we decide to keep the same system in place just with different technologies? And I feel like we're at the same, very similar moments in time. We can, with Bitcoin, create an entirely new society and build something radically different, or we can use it to just, uh, yeah, um, replicate the system that we already have. Yeah, and we're at that moment now. We are deciding right now. I think we're deciding mainly to replicate the old system, and Bitcoin will just become another tool and technology inside the existing system. But we still have a chance for it to become something different, and that's why I teach it. That's why I think it's. That's why I support it. That's why I'm a Bitcoiner. But and to compare that to the Roman world, yeah, they faced a similar issue in the fifth, sixth, seventh centuries, where they could replicate old systems, but there was a choice to try something new, and ultimately that led to the collapse of the Roman world. It was conscious choices to do things differently. We, as historians, we often would speak about art, coinage, also the images on coins and so on, as barbaric, and clearly people were stupider, and they didn't have the skills that the Romans did, and so on. But now we realize that these were conscious choices to do things differently
Mhm.
than the way they had been done. And so, yeah, will we make that choices? And and yeah, I mean, I also teach religion, so the history of religion in the period, and that happens in Christianity very, very early. I mean, what is actually taught in Christianity in the first century and early second century, and what it ultimately becomes is completely different. And bishops and other Christian figures recognize that early on. They say what we're doing is not what's in the teaching, but so you have, whether it's the Christ event or the fall of Rome or Bitcoin moment, you have a radically new idea that enters the world. And will we let it change the world, or will we just sublimate it into existing norms? But yeah.
So, what to get a little bit more granular, looking from the time period of the Roman Empire all the way through Visigothic Spain, what are kind of these like key properties of coinage that kind of maybe pop up over and over again over the years? Like, why do some of these coins like
Mm.
fail? Why do new coins resurface? Why do people agree on this like shared monetary ledger, like as the money? What's like the, I'm curious to hear like what's the like evolution like of money like throughout the time, throughout these kingdoms, throughout the rise and fall of empires.
Yeah, great. Like, again, the actual historian, like myself, I won't claim to know the whole history of every place ever and through all of time. And nor I'm going to make some gigantic, overarching, long durée type of argument, which is a popular type of history that you read with, I don't know, people like Yuval Harari or Jared Diamond and stuff. These are great for airport books, but real science and research is a lot more boring. No, maybe not boring, but it's more specific. And the thing is that everything can change tomorrow, just like everything could have changed yesterday. And so we keep making individual choices every single day. And when you really, like you're saying, when you really go down into it and look closely, we'll see that everything is human choices, and that relates obviously as well to the coinage. And so there are some patterns that we see in the late Roman world, and some of those patterns are, there's something called the Age of Gold in the fourth century, fifth century, where there's an explosion of gold in the market, and so gold coins really become uh, much more circulating. They circulate a lot more, and they become standardized in the East, in Constantinople, in the Eastern Empire. And you have very, very nice golds, and the quality of a gold coin and the quality of the images on the coin are what define the authority of the states. And we have stories of that from the period of traders going to various places, including places like Sri Lanka and other places far outside the Mediterranean, and local kings seeing the different coins, and always, or at least many times, seeing the Byzantine coin and saying, "Wow, there must be something special about that emperor. It must be, because look at how amazing their coins are." So the physical beauty of the coinage determined the political authority of the states, and people are impressed by the beauty of that coinage. And so that is definitely something we see, a pattern we see, and I think about it with Bitcoin in the sense of, we live in a very scientific society, even if it's a very religious society as well. I still think that science is, certainly by students on campus, very much admired as sort of this thing that can cure anything. Science can figure out anything, solve all of our problems, ultimately fix and tell us the whole nature of the universe, and so on. And mathematics is part of that. And I think that maybe that's what ultimately will make Bitcoin most beautiful, most adopted around the world, is the science of it, is the mathematics behind it. And w- what's more beautiful, something that is mathematically sound, or something that's a pretty coin that's gold? I don't know. Maybe that's but maybe that question is where we are as a society. Maybe we're on that point where we're going from sort of aesthetics of beauty to intellectual beauty of mathematics. And I always think about bringing back Pythagoreanism, and but it makes me think of also transhumanism, and the imagination that we're going to become more than what we are. Just a little bit like Nietzsche, not exactly, a little bit like the Ubermensch, that we need to transcend beyond what we are right now. And maybe Bitcoin is that rope that allows us to cross over to our next evolution. And we're kind of here now. What defines the beauty of money? Yeah.
Mhm. It sounds like the scarcity of the resource, whether it was gold or silver, or whether it was the access to like artists or masonry, just the ability to mobilize capital, mobilize energy around you, and then convert that into your medium of exchange, then transcends almost these like social things that we've got going on, and creates like that the scarcity creates value. The scarcity is something that's desirable. And in the 21st century, after and throughout almost every century, that scarcity has manifested itself in a different form. And
Hmm.
maybe like that's the paradigm shift that we aren't like ready for today. It's that
Yeah, maybe
way
it's
in which
interesting though.
scarcity
I mean,
shows itself.
sorry, go ahead too. Yeah, sorry.
No, sorry, sorry, I was just wrapping up.
No, I just, it's interesting because Bitcoiners, without realizing it, oftentimes repeat Marxist ideas and Marxist interpretations of money and economy. And I think here it's a great case. Like the idea that, I mean, that there's all this value inside of a product because of how much labor went into creating it, right? All the labor value, and then the use value, then exchange value, and so on. This total value is an idea that comes from Marxism, but it's so ingrained in us because it seems so obvious. In capitalism, that's part of that's a value point, and scarcity is part of that. So, on the one hand, I want to think like I wanted to say that I don't see, again, at least from what I've seen, and now I'm going to go talk to some archaeologist friends after this. A lot of discussions or records like of the scarcity of gold being what impressed people. It's more just the physical beauty of it, and so there's that means that value is cultural because like today, like anytime, what we think is beautiful is a cultural thing. And so, yeah, I also think gold is beautiful and shiny and nice, but why? I don't know. It's part of the culture. So, um, yeah. So I think that However, on the other hand, I think even though like what you're saying, I think is very much a modern phenomenon. What is also a very interesting from modern phenomenon for what you say is the scarcity, right? It's almost like there was in the 19th century, like with China, like China, the like plates and teacups and things like that type of China porcelain. There was this sense, and in the early 20th century as well, right? That's anything that is people were really fascinated by things that were mass produced, right? Because that was new, that was interesting. They were either something from far away in China that is mass produced, or something that is here mass produced. But then we had a cultural shift where we started to be more interested in things that are made locally, things that are rare, that are uncommon, and maybe Bitcoin is maybe the end point, or maybe the fulfillment of that trend, the going local type of trend. But of course, being a very global network, but still, it's a global network. Maybe it's that old idea of what was it like? Think globally, act locally, something like that. Because I mean, effectively, I am thinking globally with Bitcoin, but I'm mining my own Bitcoin in my room right now. So I'm producing it locally. So, but so yeah, that's interesting. It's yeah, maybe an expression of this idea. But that would be definitely a modern idea, I think.
Interesting. You mentioned earlier kind of the this property of some coins being non-fungible and other coins just being totally fungible.
Hmm.
Does that have to do with like appeal to authority in the sense that some people just accepted certain coins because of the artistry embedded onto it?
No, so what I mean is that some of the coins there in Visigothic Spain in the 7th century, and I'm still working on this. I'll talk about it more in the book that will come out next year, but it's not fully done yet. That is all the coins that were produced were totally fungible, regular coins. They operated by the value that they were designed to operate, and they operated over, not to get too into the weeds, I guess, but in the course of the 7th and 8th century, the amount of gold in there was decreased. So the coins were debased over time, but the value remained like a dollar. We'll just say. So they remain regular fungible coins like any other regular currency, but depending on where they were made, and potentially by the mark of the minter who made them, they seem to have had added value. Right? Like if you had a coin from someone from a certain minter, it seems to have had added value, and that seems to be recognized in the records. So there's some very odd situation of non fungibility on top of a fungible. Like if you had a dollar that Bansky had drawn something on, it would be worth more probably. But it could still be a dollar, right? So yeah. So you see some things like that which are fairly unique. I mean, the Visigoths were unique in a lot of what they did. They created a lot of brand new things, some good and some terrible. So yeah,
And that's interesting how like the perception of like the culture determines the value get assigned to certain things. I guess in Bitcoin we kind of automatically assume that scarcity creates the value, but it's
that's a
all in the eye
false
of the
assumption.
beholder.
Yes, that's the problem. Yeah, it's a false assumption. Also, that I mean, the 21 million thing is. I'm not a technical genius or expert, though I do know enough of to know that we can actually add more coins if we really wanted to Bitcoin. It would be a very difficult process to get that, but the 21 million isn't 100% absolute maximum. It could change. It almost certainly will not change. Uh, but there is technical ways. There is a technical way to alter that, but it would take a lot of consensus in the network. But yeah, I don't think the scarcity. There are a lot of things that are scarce, and historical artifacts are scarce, right? Like I have coins at home here somewhere um, from the Roman Empire. I have coins that were minted by Mark Antony. No one can ever create a coin again by Mark Antony. Mark Antony is long dead, and so on. That's scarce, but it's not going to go up in value automatically over time. In fact, things that are scarce go down in value all the time. So the scarcity is not the element; it's a cultural element. It's exactly like what we were talking about. Exactly what you said. And if we keep repeating dictums over and over again, oh, it's a scarcity, oh, it's a 20, oh, it's this, we start to create truths, but then we start to ride this fine line between uh, those being organic uh, points of value versus artificially constructed ones that we would inside of a political discourse or a religious discourse or some other artificial construction, um, which is not to say for people, you know to people that their religion is artificial, in the sense of God and so on. I just mean that religions have their own ideas, they construct them, they believe in them, they push them, just like politics or anything else. And we ride that line in Bitcoin all the time of getting close to becoming a religion. Uh, so, and maybe we should be a religion because then everything we do will be tax exempt. But
It's a good point, actually.
yeah, I thought about it. Just registering Bitcoin. I mean, we have foundational text, we have meetings, we have everything that would define a religion. Um, I have no idea what that would mean for like strategy or Bitcoin companies. They would then become, I don't know what they would become. Basically, religious institutions, and they wouldn't have to pay taxes. Um, yeah.
Interesting.
Who would be the heads of the we would you have to have, according to the US government documents, you need to have like leaders of the religion and so on. So, which in itself is interesting. The government defines religion as something that is hierarchical and centralized, so it doesn't leave any room in the documents for non-hierarchical decentralized religion. So
Right.
yeah.
And so you also had mentioned like when the money eventually starts getting debased, like the coins they get reminted and the initial value, like the amount of gold you use in the coin, is less so
Yeah.
than initially minted. Is that related in any sense to like the cooling that you had uh, described earlier as well?
Yeah. Oh, it's a good question. It's two things on that. Just one, I want to say I think we already kind of have debased Bitcoin in the sense that we have all this wrapped Bitcoin, right, and all the different layer twos and side chains and and a lot of people don't know the difference. So we already have some kind of debasing, even if it's not a debasing of actual Bitcoin. But the other is there's probably a lot of paper Bitcoin. That's another concern I wonder about all the time. I mean, you have central banks, governments, corporations, and firms all the time announcing they've bought 10,000 and 20,000, and you know, how much Bitcoin can they really have? I mean, there's only so much, and I've never seen anybody. And again, maybe it happened. I just don't know about it. I haven't seen anybody actually go through all the claims, say over the past 5 years, of all the central banks and companies and so on that have said they've bought enormous amounts of Bitcoin, to trace how much it actually adds up to, because it's like the actual cross of Jesus, right? Somebody historian looked at all the claims of the different churches that claim to have crosses, like a piece of the actual cross, and if they were all true, the cross would be like 100 feet tall or something like that. So it makes me think of that. So I think that there is potentially some debasement going on. Of course, it's not the same because it's not a debasement of real actual Bitcoin. But the but yeah, the in terms of the cooling techniques in debasements, yeah, definitely. I don't know about, yeah. I have to think further about how it could relate, how we could debase actual Bitcoin in terms of cooling techniques for Bitcoin. But certainly it there are different cooling methods for different metals, right? So if you're filling your gold on the outside, gold shell with bronze or something, certainly the cooling technique is different. So yeah, it definitely does relate to debasement. Yeah. hmm, to think about how it could relate to um, debasing Bitcoin, I don't think it could debase like different cooling methods. Different cooling methods can definitely affect your hash rate, right? Trying to capture and like I always thought about powering or sorry, charging batteries with excess energy from the fans. And you could do that. And people who know better than I do thermodynamics in the heat pump movement tell me it's possible, but you're gonna lose some of that cooling, and so you're gonna have to underclock, and so you're gonna lose some of your hash rate, and maybe that's okay depending on what's going on in the network and so on. But you'd really have to monitor it. So yeah, maybe not debasing, but definitely affecting your hash rates. But who knows? I mean, there's all sorts of new ways of cooling, like laser cooling. Um, yeah, still, I don't think it can affect the actual Bitcoin, but yeah. But it's a good question. It's a good line of thinking. Mm.
For sure.
Hmm.
But when these coins, when they were debased, so cooling was like the primary technology. Like that was one of the primary technologies used to debase the currency, because like that's just how coins were minted.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that the cooling was a technology used for debasing, but it was involved in the process, I guess. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Hmm.
The debasement was something that was unsurprising to any Bitcoiner, something that was organized from central governments. So the king would order them to be debased. It wasn't because of a lack of, typically, it wasn't a lack of access to gold or bronze or whatever it was.
Oh.
It was
What was
typically
the like incentive then to like
uh,
debase?
t- same as today, circulate more cash. get more money floating around the economy. Uh, Same ideas. Yep. People don't have enough money, so let's debase it and put more money in people's hands, and then they feel like they have more money, and just keep doing that, and until the whole thing crashes, which is the plan, obviously, for of our government. Just keep doing it until it all crashes, and then go somewhere else.
Didn't you hear about the treasury buybacks though?
Give me a break.
They're recalculating the monetary policy, so
Give me
it's
a
no
break.
longer QE, so we're all good.
Government has no plan. That's the thing. It just got to make stuff up as it goes. Neither party has a platform or a plan. They just make stuff up as they go. So no, I don't have any. In fact, that's how capitalism functions, right? I mean, you have to have this debt, and ever increasing debt, and so on. So there's nothing surprising about this. This is the ultimate. This is how our form of capitalism, and there are different forms of capitalism for sure. And I recommend anyone to read a book called Capitalism Alone by Milenko Brankovic. Great book from years ago. Talks about different forms of capitalism in the world. But ours, that's the ultimate end goal. This is, the whole thing is going to collapse. Most of the power and money will be held in the hands of a few, and the dollar system, the fiat government will be worth nothing and collapse. And then the state will be saved by going to war, and just sort of creating a new version of the currency. It's a classic. Um, yeah. So I don't see the government. The government will never pay off that debt. There's no intention by anyone to ever pay off that debt. That will just keep going forever. That's why it's so important to buy Bitcoin and to hold Bitcoin, because yeah, the government can't do that, and need to make sure that corporations and governments don't get enough Bitcoin where they can control it. It's great. We're such a dangerous line here. I mentioned before, and that we're at an important moment in Bitcoin. Of we want governments to adopt. We don't want to be arrested for owning our Bitcoin and stopped from mining Bitcoin. Yet, yeah, if they get too involved, yeah, they can control it, and that becomes a problem.
Mhm. Is that a trend also that you've seen like throughout the histories of these empires? The kings will just debase currencies, not necessarily a scarcity driven issue because there's not enough gold, but just for the sake of keeping people happy, like rinse and repeat, like a few emperors down the line, uh,
Yeah,
then
yeah,
they wage war in order to, because they had, then the scarcity becomes an issue because it's been rinsed and repeated so much.
yeah, absolutely. I would say certainly in the Roman world, again, what I know best, and the late Roman and early Middle Ages, you definitely see this. I would say it's very similar to today in the sense that it's sometimes it is a scarcity issue. Sometimes they don't have enough gold, they don't have enough silver. They don't. Sometimes that does happen, for various reasons. But a lot of times, yes, it's that those who are in power, the king and his court, the president and Congress will say, something like that. They just need a bunch of money to pay off political favors, and so they just mint more of it and pay off their political favors. And then they need more favors, and so they mint more money, and they pay off more people to help them, support them, keep them in power. And yeah, that's age old, absolutely. And I don't think that our system functions all that much differently from the late Roman world or early medieval, or what used to be called feudal, type of system. It's minted, and I mean, money is about power and control, and that's why Bitcoin is so important, and that's why it's such a threat, because it's no central authority. Uh, well, central authority could, I guess, ban everybody from mining Bitcoin and mine it all itself, but hopefully that won't happen. If we can get everybody heating their homes at Bitcoin, that makes it all that much harder for any government to come in. Um, yeah.
And
Uh,
an interesting parallel that I noticed was how you mentioned that these coins had like images transcribed onto them, not only as an appeal to power to send it to the Chinese king, and then kind of use that as a sign
mhm,
of like almost intimidation or power or whatnot.
mhm,
But the parallel to today, in which with the Bitcoin blockchain, you can encrypt like digital history like onto it, uh,
mm,
or when you're mining a block, you
mm,
can kind of preserve some sort of. I
mm,
guess at the end of the day, it's all zeros and ones, but once you like decrypt it, it can be a form of art, it can be uh, a
mm,
message, or it can also be a an act of malfeasance, like we saw with the block that Marathon had mined
mm.
with the explicit content, which I guess is the source of this like core versus knots debate.
Yeah,
Um, but
that's
interesting, like parallel, I guess.
no, that's really interesting, right? To think about that because you could, I mean, not to go too far down the line of that debate between the two sides, but sorry, the sun is at the wrong, exactly the wrong height, like for this. But all right, let's see if I can get out of it. Nope, I can't avoid the sun, I guess.
Golden
So,
hour.
so I think that's it's interesting because yes, now so what Mara, well, something we also did in the lab here, one of the students for a different chain, just for as a side project. I mean, we could is you know you can use private mempools to right, so we could all be building private mempools that don't announce anything to the chain, so nobody knows what's coming, and then all of a sudden, boom! When our pool mines the block, all those transactions that we have in our private mempool go to the chain. And Mara has that with Slipstream, right? And they offer that as a service to people, but it's very easy to build. So you could do something like that, but also, yeah, it's interesting, like with mempool.space, and you see all the different, like this block, and so therefore you know which bitcoins were created by Foundry, which ones were created by Antpool, which ones were created by whatever SEC pool, all the regular ones you see, Spider pool happening, mining blocks every day. Yeah, I mean that would be like, what if the U.S. government had its own pool, and it would be like, and we would see which bitcoins were mined by U.S. government,
Hmm.
and so those would kind of be like official U.S. Coins, or ones by the UK or EU. And then like there could be a race, right? And China could do it, and everyone, and then yeah, that would be interesting to see if there was authority, because you could trace it clearly, and it would be a very serious race. I mean, it's something like, a little bit like soft war, and right, Lowry, this idea of the wars over that. Um, that would be interesting. Like, I mean, obviously I've never seen anything like that, and I'm sure you haven't either. But of anybody like privileging different bitcoins because a certain miner mined them, but we could definitely, and in the U.S. government could even say, hey, we only allow the circulation of coins that can be proven to have been minted by our U.S. government pool. It could do that. Yeah, that's scary. They could do that, and every country could do that. But also, yeah, on op return data, and witness data, you couldn't. Yeah, you can put stuff in there and say, hey, this is official. You could write a little line, right? This is U.S. government coin, or legal tender in the U.S., legal tender in UK, whatever you want, and then say only these bitcoins, or only these sats are legal tender in the U.S. And if you use any other one, you're going to jail. I mean, yeah, we could do all of those things. That's terrifying. Um, yeah.
I guess if that were to happen, though, there would be have to be a certain degree of coercion from the state, because I'm assuming, like, if you're in Visigothic Spain or you're in Rome and you use someone else's coin, like you use a Chinese coin, for example,
Hmm.
but the state said like no Chinese coins allowed,
Hmm.
and all of a sudden it's like this underground operation to use Chinese coins within the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
That could be like that's something that's like investigatable, like in the physical world, like you can kind of like figure it out.
Hmm.
But I'm thinking with a digital currency that's like fully decentralized, and you can't really you're like mixing and matching satoshis. It
Right,
just
but
sounds
it's
like orders of magnitude more difficult
I don't
to.
think not with I don't think so. I mean, there are already right forensic tracing, forensic companies, right, tracing Bitcoin transactions, and the government is following your Bitcoin transactions. That's already happening. So, and because it's all transparent, once it hits the chain, yeah, you can have a private mempool, and these are transactions waiting to happen, but they haven't hit the chain. Once they hit the chain, everyone knows, what they are. So because it's transparent, I think that there would then when you start to incorporate AI tools to just track all of that data, I don't think it's that difficult at all. Ultimately, to be able to trace all of that, and in fact, it's easier than physically. Yeah, certainly, like in the Roman world and early medieval worlds. There were the coercion would be force, military force, but that's nothing compared to the military force we have today. Right, the government can compel you to do anything in a second. A soldier could be at your door in an hour wherever you live. So I think that uh, yeah, there's a lot more power for the government to force us, to coerce us today. In fact, like in the Visigothic world, one of the things that happened was, um, not to get too much into the weeds in that, but there was kind of a schism happening in the Visigothic Church. Didn't Catholic Church didn't agree with the rest of the Catholic Church. They had a lot of fights, and the rest of the Catholic Church didn't really like them. And so what happened a lot is Visigothic coins, even when they were better coins in that they were more pure gold, um, they would not be accepted in other Catholic kingdoms. Uh, on the ground, people didn't like Visigoths because they felt they weren't in communion totally with the church. So and then that wasn't because anyone told them not to accept those coins. That was, I mean, okay, in part because there's a discourse that's happening and so on. But so today would be more like, it's not that the U.S. government says that Chinese money is not legal tender here. It's just that I don't want it, and I don't like it, and we don't really have the power to make that choice. The government tells us what is legal and what is not. So there's a lot more communities had a lot more power in that world than we do today. So but yeah, I think on the Bitcoin side, yeah, you could trace all of that, and it's. I hope no one from the government is listening, because if I was the government and I was trying to control it, that's exactly what I would do. I would run a whole bunch of core nodes, and I would start mining officially, and just say, hey, these are the legal bitcoins, and and I'm gonna write something on them, and yeah,
Hmm.
maybe they will. I mean, I don't know. On the other hand, the government, doesn't really have a plan. As I was saying, like, I talked to some members of um, Congress this summer. I won't mention who. This is probably pretty obvious, anyways. People who work in Bitcoin. In Bitcoin, I saw them. One of them in Bitcoin, Alaska, and I was talking to him, and and it was clear how little members of Congress actually know about Bitcoin. And I was saying, you could do this and you could do that, and not what we're talking about right here, just different things. And he was like, yeah, there's me and there's one other person who really knows about Bitcoin, and I'm telling you, we don't know anything about what you're talking about. And like, so yes, they could do all these things, but you know, it, I don't know. They can barely keep the government open, let alone come up with
Right.
devious plans like this. So
It is devious indeed. Another parallel that that I caught up on was kind of this trend that we have like today with monetary debasement, kind
mm.
of leading to more inflation, and then more inflation leads to ordinary people kind of demanding stimulus checks or demanding more perks, I guess more socialism from the government, which leads to this bifurcation that you also touched on, where the 1% just becomes smaller and smaller because their stocks, their assets are all going up through the virtue of monetary debasement, while the middle class gets squeezed out, and then kind of creates the have yachts and have nots, and the have nots are just like fighting for their lives, like trying to keep up with inflation, and then just electing these governments that have like the promise of giving them more of these perks or more of these like government programs, Medicaid or whatever it really may be in the future, like government housing, then government food stamps, and then uh, just this trend of electing in officials that are more socialist than not. Is this also a trend that you've noticed in your study throughout like different periods of history where uh, the inflation happens, the debasement happens, people now look to a source of authority that caters more towards these kind of ideologies?
No, I think the modern world is very different from in that sense because, first of all, because of the French Revolution and the idea of human rights. Human rights didn't exist before that, as we understand it. No one just has a right because they're a human in the ancient world and early medieval world. Everybody's competing for different rights. So there wasn't an expectation that, hey, the government's going to do this for me and do that for me. There wasn't even a sense of government. Like the Romans had no economy or government as such. They just made up things as they went along. And even the whole conception of time, like we measure time with a calendar that goes year one, two, three, four, whatever, until whatever. And so, but the ancient world had, first of all, multiple calendars, but also I didn't think like that. It would go by, it would be like if our calendar would just be, I don't know, Trump's year one, two, three, and four, and then the next president year one, two, three, like, and so on. And so there isn't that like just imagination of time as this sort of forever space time linearity. And so as such, there wasn't this sense of long planning, and the government is there to build long institutions to help us in the long term. So it's a completely different imagination of past and future, and therefore the role of authority. And kings stayed in power as long as people were generally happy and nobles were generally happy, and that meant providing what made people happy in the Roman world, right? Bread and circuses, you I've probably heard of, and most people, right, and have heard of. The Roman world would, in Rome, they would provide food to people for free, right? As part of being an empire. The reason, the benefit of living in an empire, the benefit of living in Italy as a Roman would be that you would get free food and housing would be covered and other things like that. Because if these things weren't covered, those who were in power faced the risk of being killed, of losing power. Today, we don't really, those who are in power, not necessarily in government, but billionaires and so on, there's no risk to them, right? 90% of people can live in poverty and live without any hope of the future, and there's no risk to those people. So why would they do anything differently? Why would they help anybody? They have no reason, no incentive to help anyone. So it's a different world, but the government is in this interesting position today because its authority rests on its promise to be helping people. right? That's what gives it legitimacy. And if it's not making our lives better, if it's not making us our communities safer and making it easier to exist and so on, where's its authority? Why does it? Why should we be supporting it? And so, yeah, you have this strange situation where, on the one hand, yeah, it's like it has to be providing these things. On the other hand, it doesn't want to provide these things, and it risks losing its authority. So, yeah, I think it's. But you mentioned socialism, and that's an important factor as well because the socialist movement has made us used to things that that we don't even know are socialists, like the weekend. We just assume everyone has a weekend, right? That's something that came out of many decades of struggle and socialist struggle and union struggle to get a weekend. And that just seems obvious to us. And so there's a lot of things that come out of that we've been pushing for, and because of that, the government has maintained its authority. But now, with the debasement of endless debasement of currency, uh, it's losing it. What is the reason for it, right? I mean, the only reason that seems to be left is that it's claiming that it's making us safer, that it's getting rid of people who are dangerous, and so on. Okay, it can run that line for a while, but eventually people will see through that. And so, what will be its next act as the whole thing collapses? um, uh, Maybe it will adopt Bitcoin as better currency. Maybe that would be incredible and shocking, but I don't think it would do that without controlling Bitcoin. Um, um, and It seems to be there seems to be some movement in that direction. To me, I don't. Yeah, those who are
Well,
in
I think the
power.
calculus is still clear. Like people look to the government for the safety, for the recognition, for the services.
Mhm.
But now in 2025, unknowingly, without the knowledge of the source of like the uncertainty or like the like political dismay or societal dismay or whatever it may be, like
Mhm.
now they're looking for these goods and services as a direct result of like poor monetary like policy, like a poor money supply. So it's like I think that parallel in itself is pretty strong.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, right? Like, yeah, exactly. Like, whereas there was a situation where, say, working hard um, would allow you to have all of these things. Working very hard and working many hours a week would allow you to earn money that had enough value to be able to get health insurance and food in your house and all of that. But now it doesn't. So there's more and more calls for somebody to step in and provide that for you because working is not the way to success. And yeah, I would say that's a sign of collapse of a system. Yeah, and failed monetary policy is part of that for sure. I just don't see any plan to do it differently. I mean, I wish, but yeah, I I don't know. Maybe what do you think? I mean, do you see? I mean, uh, any plan to anywhere to get us out of that trap?
I mean, probably not. I don't think it's a good decision to bet against Bitcoin. I mean, I think the trajectory is clear, and there's a clear kind of remediation to that downward spiral that has
Mhm.
been kind of spiraling for the last century.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think it's fascinating these like parallels that we see throughout history to today. Um, how like the properties of money have been redefined through these like cultural norms, through social norms, and also through authority and religion and kings and empires and now central governments. The as the saying goes, like history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. And we can see through these different shades of time how these different things like manifest themselves in society over and over again. Um, but yeah, maybe like our last topic for today can be just I'm still curious. I'm still kind of not piecing together like the whole cooling aspect and kind of the harness of energy and how that leads to the formation of society, um, all
Mm.
that.
Yeah, I think the cooling aspect is something I'm still investigating. I'm in terms of like as a historian of how what we're doing with cooling uh, fits into the longer history of cooling and money and cooling technology. There are a lot of books about the history of refrigeration and air conditioning and stuff like that. But as a broader, and in talking about in the ancient world, how people cooled their houses down by running cold water through the walls and so on. This is stuff that's talked about many times. But in relation to currency and just more broadly, cooling and technology, how it relates, and for us in the modern world, specifically um, the politics and of energy. And energy is simply a political issue. We know from Tesla that there are ways to get plenty of electricity without coal and natural gas and biomass, and we could have renewable energy. We could have free energy, but there's all sorts of political reasons that stop us from wanting to do that. Some of it is corporations obviously owning resources. Some of it is people who don't believe that humans should have anything for free. That we should work for everything. I disagree. I think that stuff should be free. As I always tell the students in my religious classes, for those who are religious, I don't see, for anyone who's Christian or Jewish, I don't see how you could not agree with that, because God in the Bible gives everything to us, doesn't sell it or lease it out. Right. So the whole premise is that it's all given for free. So for us to use. So yeah, and then of course political arguments, which is very strange. You have typically on the side of liberals, I mean by sort of mainstream center left, here Democrats, and other countries Labor Party, very much against Bitcoin and the consumption of energy, while parts of the parties and parts of that movement claiming to be progressive. How the hell can you be progressive and want to advance society and make life more comfortable and better by using less energy? To me, that just sounds like wanting to be Amish or Luddite. Like you don't want to advance technology, and I mean, the use of more energy makes life better. Period. Life is better today because I'm using more energy, and life will be better in the future because we'll all use a lot more energy. So using energy is a good thing. Let's use more of it, and so let's mine more Bitcoin and heat our houses with it, and not let governments create money, because we're all screwed so long as governments are the only source of money. And I agree completely with the idea that our goal this century is to separate money and state. I agree with Tatek, who his book on separation of money and state. He came to my class last semester, and hopefully will come back again next semester. So. But until we separate money and state, I don't think we'll solve that energy issue. I think that we're still going to be energy is going to be a political football used by the different sides to basically stop progress. And there was this idea of the lost century over the past 100 years of like there were so many things we could have done technologically to make society better, but we chose not to because of political issues. And I hope that we don't lose another century of technological advancement because of those issues. And but the first step in actually progressing is not is to separate money from states.
Yeah, and I guess on this idea of harnessing energy, um, if you take the base case, like fire was just a chemical reaction that you you unleash just like untapped energy from sources in the natural world. And fire, you harnessed energy, you used the energy, and
Hmm.
ultimately that's how like civilization was built, and like how like the human race like came to where it was today. So just by extension of that, it just makes sense that to get like we probably have a fire today that we don't even know like what actually is the fire that's going to take us to the next like quantum leap of civilization. And maybe that fire is Bitcoin, like the fire in cyberspace, or maybe it's something else, like who knows,
Yeah,
maybe it's AI. I mean,
but in like I teach the students all the time as a historian and looking at also history of technology. Technology doesn't change anything. That's so important to realize. Doesn't matter what technology we create; it's our decisions as humans what we do with it. Right? We had plexiglass in the first century. The first century, plexiglass was invented. We have it in Roman sources talking about it. And the Roman Emperor Tiberius was afraid of. He thought the person who created it was some sort of magician or dangerous person, and he killed them and destroyed all the plans on creating it. We have batteries from the earlier Middle Ages, electrical batteries. We have them. They're not just like we don't read about them. We physically have them as archaeological artifacts, and they were used probably for torture. But we can create technologies that don't have then are not adopted. So like you're saying, yeah, we could have that technology. Bitcoin could be that technology that brings us, that fulfills the Nietzschean Ubermensch and gets us over to the next level of evolution. What will we be? What will we? I mean, humans are always evolving, and what will be that evolution, or will it be devolution? Will we get dumber? Will we get slower? And But it's our choice, and that's a lot of times I feel like the students don't, and just people in general, feel like we don't have enough choice. But even like with voting, you hear all the time, well, I want to do that, but I need to be realistic. You don't need to be realistic. You need to do what you think is best. Everything that is happening is just choices that we make, and we can just make different choices. Or like in Bitcoin, we can just do things, right? And I think that's a very important lesson in Bitcoin that I hope people really take. That we can just do things. It's all up there for us to decide. And so yeah, I think Bitcoin is that tool, and I think Bitcoin has a lot of very deep spiritual, theological elements to it that connect us to universal energy. And maybe for a different discussion, but I think that it's in many ways I see Bitcoin as a deep spiritual moment, and almost like a fulfillment of what was taught about in the first century, and what led to new forms of Judaism and Christianity. When I read the New Testament and Jesus says, "Render unto Caesar," I read him as saying, "Screw fiat." And I mean that's serious though. I mean that whole movement was about decentralization and not accepting the authority of the government and building your own community without money that is created by a central authority, but
mhm,
value that we create in our community. That's the essence of the Holy Spirit in the texts. Again, I'm not religious as such. I mean, I teach religion. Maybe I am. I don't know, and I don't admit it. But I teach this stuff, so it's always in my mind. And I think Bitcoin has that element to it. It could be something that brings us to a next level of human existence, but it's up to us. I feel like it's slipping away from us, though, as more and more of it gets in the hands of fewer and fewer people. And that's why, to me, the heat punk movement is so important. I think it's the most important thing happening in Bitcoin.
mhm.
That and non KYC lending borrowing, which I don't know of any. But lending, borrowing Bitcoin is very important. It's not legal in New York. That we don't have Strike here. Even Square doesn't, accept Bitcoin in New York. So New York is very behind in a lot of these things, as typical New York. Of course, I'm a Bostonian, so I always criticize New York. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully that's the build up throughout the series. We kind of start, history of coins and get all the way to this heat punk movement, returning sovereignty back to the individual, and the main thesis of everything. Why Bitcoin? What is Bitcoin? And why is it this why is it like the fire of the 21st century, essentially?
yeah. I mean, you can literally make money at home,
Right.
like with stuff you're already doing. You're already heating things, like, and you can just from what you're already doing create money. It's crazy, and they're anywhere that yeah, anywhere you need heat, or even cooling. So, to me, it's a radical new way of creating money and currency. It's money that's not capitalist, money that's not socialist, money that's in a new form of economy that we don't have a name for yet. And uh, I don't think we've ever had that. I mean, when we're talking about even the Roman world and we're talking about the very decentralized Visigothic, there's still mints, there's still experts who create that, right? And a lot of people today still think that to mine Bitcoin, you need to be an expert in something. You really don't. It's not hard. And so, more and more, if the more and more we can educate people in that, and we have a lot to do in Bitcoin education. A lot. We're so far behind. There's all these things happening in the government. That's great, but there aren't any campuses in the U.S. that are allowed to mine Bitcoin in any way. There's no legislation guaranteeing a right to mine. There are no Bitcoin majors and minors and PhDs. There's not even a single Bitcoin certificate, like a certificate in Bitcoin mining. There's not one college, community college, technical college, university that offers that. Not one in the US. So we're so far behind. I mean, I've been teaching Bitcoin courses for a few years. Now there's some other cool schools that are teaching it, and but we're so far behind in Bitcoin education. And as students in our Bitcoin club here will tell you, like Ava, who does the research on Gen Z, that Gen Z just doesn't know anything about it and doesn't feel that it's relevant to them. What's the future of Bitcoin for missing out on that? So yeah, all going back to the point that we're at a unique moment that I don't know will last, but that you can literally just make money at home or anywhere. Sometimes, I'll take a little bit axe with me and I just plug it in anywhere I go. I'm sitting in the airport waiting for my flight and I'm mining Bitcoin. And so, yeah, if you can tap into the airport network, it's difficult. I usually just got to use a hotspot on your phone. But anyways, yeah, my point is that it's yeah a very different moment in the history of money that I don't think we've ever seen before, and I hope that we as humans are ready for that.
Yeah. Looks like we're gonna have to create our own university.
I agree. I agree. I think the university, like a whole other conversation, but university, like government, is think about it. Like our government was designed in the 18th century. We live in a different world. I mean, I say we take the Constitution, the 250th anniversary next year, put it in a museum, start fresh. It was a great 250 years. We live in a different world now. Let's create something different. Like in universities as well. Universities are totally outdated. They're just legacy institutions that that they're just sitting there and replicating the same thing they've been doing for many many generations without ever really thinking what's the purpose, why are we here, and but I guess the market will decide as less and less people need college degrees to be successful. the colleges will start to go out of business. They'll be artificially propped up by taxpayer money for a long time. But yeah, um, that's a whole other issue. We need to completely rethink legacy institutions, whether it's banks, governments, or universities. But, yeah.
Mhm. Dope. Well, Mr. Kelly, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for sharing some information today about the history of coinage. I always appreciate our conversations, and
Mhm.
hopefully we'll see you next time for the sequel to all this. So thank you again for coming on,
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here. And Dr. Kelly.
Dr. Kelly.